She left her poor husband and her 2 kids all because of rich man. She abandoned her family because of him. But what happened will shock you. Welcome to African Tales by Victo. If you are just turning in, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. It means the world to us. It was a quiet night in Lagos, the kind where the sound of distant generators hummed like a tired choir. Inside a modest 3-bedroom flat, young Tobi, just 10 years old, clutched his school notebook tightly. Beside him, 7-year-old Kola played with a broken toy car. Their father, Mr. Adewale, sat at the dining table, grading old files from his office. The home was small, but it was warm, until a sharp sound shattered it. The slam of a door. Standing by the doorway was Cynthia, their mother. She looked different, her makeup perfect, her handbag expensive, her eyes cold. "I can't live this small life anymore," she spat, refusing to meet Adewale's steady gaze. The boys froze. Tobi's chest tightened. Kola's toy slipped from his hand. With no kiss, no glance back, Cynthia dragged her suitcase outside, where a sleek black car waited under the streetlight. Tears welled in Kola's eyes, but Tobi bit his lip hard, refusing to cry. Adewale's voice trembled but stayed calm. "Boys, remember this night. Not because she left, but because we will rise." The car drove off, leaving only smoke and silence. And in that silence, a seed of pain and determination was planted. The next morning, the house felt heavier. The smell of pap and akara filled the air, but the table was quieter than ever. Tobi sat staring at his food, while Kola kicked the leg of his chair, eyes puffy from crying all night. Mr. Adewale, though broken inside, forced a smile. "Eat, my boys. Strength begins in the stomach." His voice cracked, but he masked his pain with calm authority. Later that day, Adewale walked them to school. The neighborhood children whispered as Cynthia's sleek car from the night before was still the talk of the street. "She left them for money," one boy muttered. Tobi heard it. His fist clenched. Kola's eyes watered again, but Adewale placed a firm hand on his shoulders. "Let them talk," he said gently. "Noise does not decide your future. Only your mind does." That night, under the dim yellow bulb in their small living room, Adewale gathered his sons. He looked them in the eye, first Tobi, then Kola. "I may not have riches to give you," he said, voice steady, "but I will give you something greater: education, discipline, and a name you will never be ashamed of." In that moment, Tobi swore silently to protect his little brother, while Kola clung to their father's words like a lifeline. The following week at school, the whispers grew louder. Children laughed behind Tobi's back. "Your mama is now in Banana Island," one sneered. Another added, "She left because your papa is poor." Their cruel voices echoed in the classroom. Tobi's jaw tightened, his knuckles white around his pencil. Kola, too young to hide his pain, burst into tears. At break time, Kola sat alone under the mango tree, hugging his knees. A few older boys circled him, chanting, "No mother, no future." Just before they pushed him, Tobi stormed in. Though small for his age, his eyes burned with fury. "Touch him, and you'll regret it," he barked. The bullies hesitated, surprised at his boldness. They laughed, but they walked away. Kola looked at his brother, whispering, "Thank you." Tobi only replied, "We are all we have." That evening, Tobi told his father about the bullying. Adewale's face fell, but he didn't rage. Instead, he pulled his boys close. "Life will try to shame you," he said softly, "but shame only wins if you believe it. Stand tall, my sons. Let the world see your strength." His words became armor, wrapping their wounds in quiet dignity. The months passed, and Tobi's 11th birthday arrived. In the past, Cynthia would bake a small cake, singing off-key while laughing at her own mistakes. But this year, the table was bare. No cake. No laughter. Only a pot of jollof rice simmering quietly on the stove. Adewale tried to brighten the evening, wrapping a second-hand novel in brown paper for Tobi. "Knowledge," he said, handing it over, "is the best gift I can give you." As they ate, Kola looked at the empty chair where their mother used to sit. "Will Mama ever come back?" he asked innocently. Adewale paused, the spoon trembling in his hand. He forced a smile. "Some journeys are long, my son. But what matters is that we keep moving." Tobi looked down at his plate, vowing silently never to need her again. Later that night, while Kola slept, Tobi opened the book his father had given him. The smell of old pages filled the air. Inside the cover, Adewale had written, "Son, never stop fighting with your mind. The world belongs to thinkers." Tobi's eyes misted. On that quiet birthday, he made a promise to himself, to rise so high that no one could ever mock his family again. One humid afternoon, while Adewale returned from work, a neighbor slipped him an envelope. It was scented, the handwriting elegant. Adewale frowned, but opened it slowly. His eyes scanned the words, and his lips tightened. It was from Cynthia. She had written only a few lines. "I am well. Do not look for me. The boys will thank me someday." His hands trembled, but he folded the letter neatly, tucking it deep into his drawer. That night, as Kola played with his toy car and Tobi worked on his homework, Adewale stared into space. His heart ached with betrayal, but he said nothing. Tobi noticed his father's silence. "Papa, are you all right?" he asked. Adewale forced a smile. "I'm fine, son. Focus on your studies." But the heaviness in his tone betrayed him. Later, when the boys were asleep, Adewale knelt by his bed. "God," he whispered, voice breaking, "help me raise these boys. Don't let them grow bitter." Tears stained his pillow, unseen by anyone. And while the city outside buzzed with life, inside that small home, a father carried a weight too heavy for one man, yet he bore it with dignity. Weeks turned into months, and the boys began to adapt. Tobi, now more withdrawn, spent long hours with his nose buried in books. He was no longer just studying for exams, he was studying life. Every page felt like a weapon, every fact like a shield. Kola, on the other hand, sketched buildings in his exercise book, drawing houses with wide balconies and happy families inside. At school, their teacher, Mrs. Okafor, noticed Tobi's sharp answers and Kola's clever drawings. After class, she pulled Adewale aside. "Your boys are brilliant," she said warmly. "Don't let hardship kill their fire." Adewale's eyes glistened. "Madam, I will give my life before that happens." Her words became fuel, strengthening his resolve. That evening, under the dim light of a kerosene lantern, Adewale looked at his sons. "Tobi," he said, "your mind is your sword. Kola, your hands will shape the future. Promise me you will never waste your gifts." Both boys nodded firmly. In that simple room, surrounded by peeling paint and cracked walls, dreams far bigger than their home were born. One rainy afternoon, thunder roared over Lagos as the boys walked home from school. The gutters overflowed, and their uniforms clung to their skin. As they approached their street, two older boys blocked their path. "Your mama is enjoying life in Lekki," one sneered. "Maybe she'll send us money, since your papa can't." The sting of those words cut deep. Kola shrank back, but Tobi stepped forward. His voice shook, yet he stood tall. "Say what you want," he said, "but don't ever touch my brother." The bullies laughed, shoving him into the mud. Kola rushed to help, but Tobi pushed him back. With clenched fists, Tobi swung wildly, landing a punch. The fight was quick, messy, but it left him bloodied and proud. When they got home, Adewale cleaned Tobi's wounds silently. Then he said, "Strength is not only in your fists, my son. True strength is in rising above insult, not sinking to it." Tobi listened, but deep inside, he vowed he would never again let anyone mock his family without consequence. The rain outside slowed, but inside, the storm in his heart only grew stronger. The power was out again. Their small flat was swallowed in darkness, except for the flicker of a kerosene lamp. After supper, Adewale sat outside with his boys, the warm Lagos night buzzing with crickets. Above them, stars glittered faintly through the city haze. "Look up," Adewale said softly. Each star is a dream waiting to be claimed. Kola pointed to the brightest one. Papa, when I grow up, I'll build houses where children never cry because of leaking roofs. His eyes shone with innocence and ambition. Tobi, more reserved, whispered, I'll be a lawyer. I'll fight for people who have no one to fight for them. Adewale smiled, pride swelling in his chest. Then you will both give light to others, just like those stars. As the night deepened, Kola dozed off on his father's lap, while Tobi kept staring at the sky, his heart heavy yet burning with determination. At that moment, Adewale prayed silently, Lord, let their dreams live, even if mine fade. The night carried his prayer like smoke, unseen but powerful, weaving destiny into the boy's future. It was exam week, and Tobi's shoes had holes at the soles. Each step to school left his socks soaked by the morning dew. Kola's uniform was torn at the pocket, patched clumsily by Adewale's needlework. Still, the boys walked with heads held high. Inside, however, Tobi burned with quiet shame. He hated the way classmates stared at their clothes. At school, a group of wealthy students mocked them. One girl wrinkled her nose and said, Do you even own real shoes? Kola's face reddened, but before tears could fall, Tobi lifted his chin and replied, Shoes don't pass exams, brains do. The room went silent. Even the teacher raised an eyebrow in surprise. For the first time, the mockery lost its sting. That evening, Adewale overheard his sons whispering about the bullying. He sat beside them and said quietly, Poverty is not a curse unless you make it one. Wealth is not what you wear, it's what you carry in here. He tapped his chest. In that dim room, his words planted courage deeper than shame ever could. It was inter-house sports day at the school. Parents filled the field, cheering loudly. Children ran in bright-colored jerseys, the sun blazing overhead. Tobi sat on the sidelines, books on his lap. Sports didn't interest him. But Kola. His eyes sparkled with excitement. Despite his worn-out sneakers, he was ready to run. The whistle blew. Kola sprinted down the track, legs pumping like a machine. He was smaller than most of the other boys, but determination burned in his eyes. As he crossed the finish line first, the crowd erupted. For a moment, no one saw a poor boy in torn sneakers, they saw a champion. Tobi's chest swelled with pride, clapping harder than anyone. But the victory was bittersweet. Kola scanned the crowd for their mother, hoping she might appear just once. She didn't. Instead, he saw Adewale standing quietly at the far end, clapping with tears in his eyes. That night, as they ate a small dinner, Kola whispered, Papa, one day, you'll sit in the front row, and the whole world will know who your sons are. Adewale smiled, hiding his trembling hands under the table. One evening, Adewale came home later than usual. His shirt was damp with sweat, his face lined with exhaustion. He placed a small brown envelope on the table. Your school fees, he said quietly, forcing a smile. Tobi noticed the tired slump in his father's shoulders. Papa, did you eat today? He asked. Adewale chuckled softly. Food tastes better when my boys are in school. Later that night, Tobi found the kitchen cupboard nearly empty. Only a few cups of gari and a little groundnut remained. His heart clenched. He realized their father had skipped meals just to pay their fees. Tobi whispered to himself, One day, I will repay him. One day, he won't suffer again. Meanwhile, Kola sat at the table, sketching buildings on scraps of paper. Papa, he said innocently, when I build my first house, you'll live in it for free. Adewale's eyes misted as he pulled his sons close. You too are my wealth. As long as you rise, I have everything. That night, hunger gnawed at his stomach, but joy filled his heart. His sacrifice was sowing seeds for a brighter tomorrow. It was a Saturday morning. The boys were sweeping the compound while Adewale washed his old motorcycle. Suddenly, a sleek black SUV pulled up at the gate. The engine purred, polished rims glistening in the sun. Neighbors peeked curiously from their windows. Out stepped a woman in designer clothes, perfume trailing in the air. It was Cynthia. Kola froze. broom slipping from his hand. Toby's eyes narrowed, heart pounding. Adewale stiffened, wiping his hands slowly. "Why are you here?" he asked, voice calm but cold. Cynthia smiled faintly, her jewelry sparkling. "I came to see my sons." Her words sounded rehearsed, almost hollow. The boys exchanged a quick glance, shock, anger, and confusion battling inside them. As neighbors whispered, Cynthia opened her handbag and pulled out 2 wrapped gifts. "For you," she said, extending them toward the boys. Kola's small hands trembled, but Toby stepped forward, his voice sharp. "We don't need your gifts." The silence was heavy. Adewale's face revealed nothing, but deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of storms yet to come. Cynthia lingered at the doorway, holding her expensive bag like a shield. Kola, torn between longing and anger, shifted nervously. "Mama, why did you leave?" he asked, his small voice trembling. Her eyes darted away, lips pressed tight. Toby's stare was sharper than a blade. "Don't lie," he said coldly. "We deserve the truth." Adewale stepped in quickly, his tone firm but steady. "That's enough for today. The boys need peace, not confusion." He guided them inside, leaving Cynthia at the gate. She stood frozen, her smile fading, the weight of rejection heavy on her shoulders. The SUV drove off, but the echo of her presence lingered long after. That night, Kola whispered in the dark, "Maybe she'll come back for real next time." Toby turned away, anger tightening his chest. "Don't hope for what will only hurt you." Silence hung between them. Meanwhile, in his room, Adewale sat alone, staring at Cynthia's old photograph. A storm brewed in his heart. He feared her return might reopen wounds his sons had just begun to heal. Far from the modest flat in Surulere, Cynthia's new life glimmered inside a mansion in Lekki. Chandeliers sparkled above polished marble floors, servants hurried at her command, and designer gowns filled her wardrobe. Yet behind the glitter, cracks were forming. Her wealthy partner, Chief Okon, was no longer the confident man she once admired. Rumors of government investigations circled him like vultures. At a high society party, whispers floated around Cynthia's ears. "EFCC is watching him," one woman muttered. "Money laundering," another whispered. Cynthia forced a laugh, clutching her champagne glass tighter. But inside, fear clawed at her chest. She had traded love for wealth. What if wealth was slipping away? That night, Chief Okon returned home, his face dark with anger. He slammed a newspaper on the table. Business tycoon under federal investigation. Cynthia's hands trembled as she picked it up. "Is it true?" she asked nervously. He snapped. "Mind your business." For the first time, Cynthia saw not a protector, but a man drowning. The palace she had chosen was starting to collapse, one crack at a time. The morning news hit Lagos like thunder. Chief Okon arrested in multi-billion naira corruption scandal. Cameras flashed as security agents bundled him into a black van. Cynthia watched from her mansion window, her heart racing. Neighbors who once envied her now whispered with mocking smiles. The air smelled not of luxury anymore, but of disgrace. By afternoon, men in dark suits stormed the house. They carried files, stamped documents, and orders. "This property is under investigation," one announced coldly. Cynthia's jewelry box was sealed, her cars impounded. She clutched her designer handbag as if it could protect her, but deep inside, she knew, the empire had crumbled. That night, Cynthia sat alone in the vast, empty living room. No servants. No friends. Just silence. Her reflection in the marble floor showed not a glamorous woman, but a broken one. She thought of Tobi and Kola, faces she had abandoned for this false life. For the first time, tears fell freely down her cheeks. Pride had chained her for years, but shame was breaking those chains now. Weeks after the scandal, Cynthia's mansion was sealed, her accounts frozen, and her so-called friends vanished like smoke. She now lived in a cramped guest room offered by a distant cousin, her expensive gowns folded into a small suitcase. Each night, she stared at the ceiling, haunted by the faces of the sons she had abandoned. One morning, with trembling hands, she boarded a Danfo bus. No chauffeur, no tinted windows, just the raw Lagos streets she had once despised. Passengers eyed her, some recognizing her from the scandal splashed across newspapers. She kept her head down, clutching her bag tightly, shame burning through her skin. Finally, she stood at the old compound she once called home. The paint was peeling, the walls familiar, but the sound of laughter inside struck her hardest. Through the window, she saw Tobi reading at the table, Kola sketching as usual, and Adewale humming softly while cooking. Tears blurred her vision. For the first time, she realized, this was the true wealth she had thrown away. But would they ever accept her back? It was a quiet evening. The smell of yam porridge filled the house as Adewale stirred the pot. Tobi was buried in his books, while Kola shaded a new sketch of a tall building. Suddenly, knock, knock star. The sound froze them all. Adewale frowned. Visitors rarely came at night. When the door creaked open, there she was, Cynthia. No makeup, no jewelry, her once bright clothes faded. She looked smaller, almost fragile, as if life had drained her. Kola gasped, eyes wide, while Tobi's face hardened instantly. Adewale stood still, wooden spoon in hand, his expression unreadable. I came to see my family, Cynthia whispered, her voice trembling. For a moment, silence weighed heavy in the room. Kola's heart raced. Part of him wanted to run into her arms, but another part remembered the pain. Tobi clenched his fists, his jaw tight. Adewale finally spoke, his tone calm but firm. Family is not just blood. It is sacrifice. And sacrifice is what you left behind. Cynthia's lips quivered. For the first time, she had no words. After Cynthia's return, the house grew heavy with unspoken words. At dinner, her presence at the table felt like a ghost had joined them. Kola's eyes lingered on her face, searching for the mother he remembered. Tobi, however, refused to look her way, his fork clinking against the plate louder than usual. Later that night, as the boys lay in bed, Kola whispered, "Tobi, she's still our mother." Tobi turned sharply. "A mother doesn't abandon her children for money," he hissed. His voice was low but filled with fire. Kola's eyes watered. "But what if she's changed?" Silence followed, heavy and painful, dividing the brothers' hearts. Meanwhile, Adewale sat in the living room, staring into the dim glow of the lantern. Cynthia sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly. "Adewale, I was foolish. Please, let me make things right." His eyes lifted slowly to hers. "Words are easy, Cynthia. But wounds take time to heal." Her tears spilled, but Adewale's face remained unreadable. Deep down, even he wasn't sure if forgiveness was possible. The next morning, Cynthia rose early. For the first time in years, she tied an apron and stepped into the kitchen. The smell of frying akara filled the air. Kola rushed in, eyes widening. "Mama, you cooked?" She smiled weakly. "Yes, my son. I want to take care of you again." Kola tasted a piece, his face lighting up with a small smile. But when Tobi entered, his reaction was ice cold. He glanced at the food, then at Cynthia. "We survived without you," he muttered, pushing past her. The words cut deeper than any knife. Cynthia's hands trembled as she held the frying spoon, realizing love would not return easily. Later, as they ate together, Adewale watched silently. Kola tried to make small talk, his heart torn between loyalty to his father and longing for his mother. Tobi ate in silence, refusing to meet Cynthia's eyes. She forced a smile, but inside, guilt and sorrow weighed her down. Winning her sons back would take more than food, it would take time, patience, and a forgiveness she wasn't sure they could give. It began with a cough. At first, Cynthia brushed it off, covering her mouth with a handkerchief as she swept the compound. But the cough grew harsher, her body weaker. One evening, while cooking, she collapsed suddenly, the spoon clattering to the floor. Kola screamed, "Mama!" as Adewale and Tobi rushed in. They carried her to the bed. Sweat poured down her face, her breathing shallow. Adewale checked her forehead, worry clouding his usually calm eyes. "She needs a hospital," he said firmly. Tobi hesitated, torn between anger and instinct. At last, he grabbed his sandals. "Let's go." For the first time, bitterness had to step aside for humanity. At the hospital, the doctor spoke quietly. "She's weak. Stress and neglect have taken a toll. She'll need care." As Cynthia lay on the bed, frail and vulnerable, she reached out a trembling hand. "Tobi, Kola." Her voice cracked. Kola held her hand tightly, tears streaming. Tobi stood at the foot of the bed, fists clenched, heart breaking. For the first time, he saw not the woman who abandoned them, but a mother, human and fragile. Days passed in the hospital. Kola visited every evening after school, holding his mother's hand, telling her stories of his drawings and dreams. Cynthia listened with tears in her eyes, whispering, "I should have been here for all of it." Meanwhile, Tobi stood mostly by the doorway, his arms crossed, guarding his heart like a fortress. One evening, Adewale pulled Tobi aside. "Son," he said softly, "forgiveness is not weakness. It is strength." Tobi's eyes burned with pain. "She left us, Papa. She doesn't deserve it." Adewale placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Maybe not. But you deserve peace. Don't let bitterness chain you where love could set you free." That night, as Tobi watched Cynthia sleep, he saw her face pale and fragile. For the first time, anger gave way to something else. "Pity." He whispered under his breath. "You broke us, but maybe you need us now." His words hung in the quiet ward, the first crack in the walls he had built for years. One afternoon, as the sunlight streamed weakly through the hospital blinds, Cynthia motioned for her sons to come closer. Her voice was frail, but her eyes carried the weight of years. "Tobi, Kola, I need to tell you the truth," she whispered. Both boys exchanged uneasy glances, but they leaned in. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she spoke. "I was blinded. I thought wealth meant happiness. I thought comfort could replace love. But the cars, the houses, the clothes, they were empty. When trouble came, I was left with nothing. Not even myself." Her hands shook as she reached for them. "I traded you for shadows, and I regret it every single day." Kola squeezed her hand tightly, his own tears falling. "Mama, I still love you." Tobi looked away, his jaw clenched, but his eyes glistened. For the first time, he saw raw honesty in her words, not excuses, but confession. Silence filled the room, heavy yet healing. Forgiveness hadn't come, but the door to it had finally opened. Years rolled forward. Tobi, now a young man in a crisp suit, stood before a crowded courtroom. His voice thundered with conviction as he defended a poor market woman unjustly accused. The judge nodded in respect, lawyers whispered in admiration. From the gallery, Adewale sat proudly, his chest swelling as he watched his son fulfill the promise of his mind. Meanwhile, Kola stood at the site of his first major housing project. Tall cranes lifted beams into place as workers in helmets saluted him. On the blueprint before him was a vision: affordable, modern homes for families like his own. "Houses where no child will feel less," he murmured, smiling softly. Reporters scribbled his name, Kola Adewale, the engineer changing communities. That evening, the family gathered at home. Cynthia, still frail but recovering, watched her sons with tearful eyes. "Look at you both," she whispered. "Strong, brilliant, unstoppable." Tobi met her gaze briefly, his heart still guarded, but something inside him softened. Kola, ever tender, hugged her shoulders gently. Adewale sat silently, gratitude in his eyes. His sacrifices had borne fruit, his sons had risen. The community center buzzed with anticipation. Tobi was scheduled to give a keynote speech on justice and integrity. Journalists, students, and leaders filled the hall. As he prepared backstage, Cynthia approached slowly, leaning on a walking stick. Her voice trembled. "Tobi, will you acknowledge me today? Or must I remain in the shadows of my own children's success?" Tobi froze, his heart racing. Years of anger clashed with the lessons of his father and the quiet patience of Kola. He turned to see her, fragile, humbled, but still his mother. In that moment, the weight of his decision pressed heavily. Would he honor her publicly, or keep the walls of bitterness standing? The hall fell silent as Tobi walked to the stage. He began his speech firmly, his voice echoing. I stand here today, not because I walked an easy road, but because of sacrifices, both painful and beautiful. His eyes swept the crowd, then stopped on Cynthia. My father gave me discipline. My mother gave me life. And though she faltered today, I choose forgiveness. The hall erupted in applause, and Cynthia wept openly, her heart finally breaking and healing at the same time. The community center's applause echoed long after Tobi's words. Cynthia clutched her chest, overwhelmed. Adewale, standing quietly at the back, closed his eyes in gratitude. Kola placed a hand on Tobi's shoulder, whispering, "You did it, brother. You freed us all." For the first time in years, the Adewale family stood together. Not perfect, but whole. Weeks later, Kola's housing estate was completed. Families moved in, children's laughter filling the streets. At the opening ceremony, he cut the ribbon with pride. Every family deserves a place to call home, he declared. Cynthia watched from her seat, tears streaming, knowing her sons had become men who carried hope for others. That evening, at home, Tobi gathered the family. He raised a glass and spoke softly. Our story is proof that love survives betrayal, that dignity outlasts shame, and that forgiveness builds bridges no wealth can destroy. Adewale's eyes glistened, Cynthia sobbed quietly, and Kola smiled through tears. The camera fades on their embrace, leaving one lesson for the world. True wealth is not measured in riches, but in love, resilience, and forgiveness. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs this message. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and what act of kindness inspired you today. Thanks for being part of this journey. Until next time, remember, even the smallest act of kindness can change a life.